here we are in the second of the exhibitions that we are presenting to the Northern Westchester and Putnam County public this fall. It's an exhibition on Murano glass, done by a Japanese artist, Yoichi Ohira, a person who lived in Venice from the 1970s to the 2010s and worked in Murano, learning about the traditional techniques and taking them in an extraordinary new direction. This work is perhaps, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is on some level more approachable than some of the abstract art, perhaps because we have a basic understanding of a vase, and a vase can be different in many ways, but in the end, there is that reference to the object, which has also a use. Even if we do not use these vases, there is a recognizable form in the first place. And then there is certainly a beauty, something that perhaps was missing in the works of Manzoni, or harder to find. But where do we see this beauty here? How are we to understand this beauty? What can we learn?
Well, I think that just beginning with Ohira's preparatory drawings, which are beautiful, they are masterpieces in of themselves. What we see here is Ohira uses directions or call-outs to the design of the piece to give the glass blowers and carvers very specific direction, but the direction, as Nicola has pointed out several times, it's rather poetic. So he uses anatomical references to describe how a vase should be shaped. So, for example, I think it's over here, right? Mm-hmm. He uses the idea
here,
that
he refers to the cheek of a young girl as the idea to present that curve. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you see more, specific details in terms of a color key, where all the different parts of the Venetian glass technique should contain a certain type of pigment, and Ohira even signs each piece. So you get the sense that the artwork, it's kind of like what we call this in Italian art history, the opera totale, the total artwork. And you really get a sense of that just right from the get-go with these drawings. And
yes, they even incorporate history to some degree. In this case, we can see in this drawing how the artist came up with this design and with this pattern of alternating colors based on dresses from the 1600s in Italy. So there is this idea also of incorporating history and tradition and the legacy of one specific place into the piece. Ohira goes from objects that are to some degree traditional in terms of form and adopting techniques such as the filigrana that are traditionally of Venice, and then this tradition gets explored and taken into directions that are truly not traditional, and the results are very different. Can you guide us through some of these?
Yes, well, this exhibition really gives a trajectory of Ohira's career as a solo artist. So he had worked for the De Maio Glassworks or Glass Studio just before this. He was the artistic director. And they hired him because they wanted to, they liked the idea of incorporating an Eastern aesthetic combined with Venetian glass blowing techniques. So once he goes solo, he takes this idea and he works with some of the greatest masters, the greatest glass blowers and carvers in Murano. And he uses this concept of the iconic Japanese vase form, but everything is done with classic, traditional Venetian cold and hot processes, but he gets the artists, the masters, to push them beyond what glass is even meant to do. So this is really interesting. He really is able to push the medium in ways that is radical and groundbreaking. And of course, these masters all get acknowledgement. They are all acknowledged. These pieces are all signed with the names, not only of Ohira, but the people who actually worked on them, which is, a radical proposition because no one had done that before, right?
Absolutely, and it's a gesture of recognizing how the artistry is not, it does not reside in one single person in a sense, but it's really a cohesive effort of a group that brings together a new work of art into existence. And we can see here, to go back to our how do we look at things, I'm thinking of, for instance, noticing the various finishes that these surfaces has. All of these vases are glass, and yet some of them may appear as to be made in porcelain or various types of ceramics. They have a very opaque surface. Others look like they've been made with carved wood. In other cases, what strikes me is the fantasy, the visual fantasy. Whereas we had before Manzoni, who could not, would not, did not want to give us any image. Yeah. Here we have a great fantasy and a great observation of the surroundings. In this case, we're looking at a vase that looks like an architectural structure, like a building with windows that one can peer into and have a sense of the three-dimensionality of a built space. In other cases, we have elements of nature or elements of the Venetian landscape. Can we take a look at a few of those and
yes.
discuss how they come into being and how do they represent what they try to represent?
Yes, well, one of the things that I love about Ohira's work is the use of narrative. So in the case of the Acqua Alta pieces, Ohira is making reference to the high tide when the waters rise, which is typically what, in like November?
In the fall, yes.
Right? So the waters rise in Venice and, flow into the streets. Sometimes the main square is completely flooded. And he shows us this in this very lyrical way by using pigment to represent the cobblestones of Venice. And then the top of the piece is worked in this battuto technique, which is carving the glass in such a way as to suggest ripples or small waves in the water. So we have this idea of the water rising and just flowing onto the street. So it creates this nice little narrative about Venice for us. Or in the case of these pieces, Ohira has given us the 4 phases of the moon.
Absolutely. And in these, we have a sense of the Venice lagoon, the fact that the waters of the lagoon are sometimes murky. There is seaweeds, there are plants and vegetation that grows right underneath the level of the water, and that sense of murkiness and the presence of life and movement in the lagoon is very much transferred to us by the juxtaposition of the colors and the movements in the lines that were created in the piece, and the transparencies that were built into the glass used. And towards the end of his career, though, Ohira went in a different direction. After 20 years of color being one of the dominant features of many of these vases, he decided to abandon color completely, to move in the direction of pure crystal, and with that also sizable volumes. The pieces become sculptural in ambition. And I want us to take a look at them and see what we can say. Again, from a formalist perspective, there are some things here to be said that while these may not be apparent in terms of the image that they try to suggest, there are references that we can tease out, right?
Certainly. These pieces make very direct reference to the human anatomy, but in a very, almost in the sense of classical antiquity. You can see with, for example, this central piece here, and there is a preparatory drawing that very explicitly shows us that it is composed in a contrapposto style. In other words, a contrapposto is this type of pose that you see typically in statues of classical antiquity, where the hip is slightly out and one leg is out. So there's this kind of natural pose of someone who is at ease. And you see this throughout all of these pieces. These are all done in a sommerso technique, I believe, where the glass blower is able to dip an object into the molten glass to create the void inside the vessel itself. And yeah, you can see everything, has this sort of almost abstracted torso shape.
Well, thank you, Greg. We learned a lot today. This was a good conversation.
Thank you, Nicola. That was
Absolutely.
great.
Absolutely. And hopefully we will have this conversation with many of our visitors in the coming weeks and months as this exhibition continue to enliven the community here in Cold Spring.